difficult issues that we had to take on was in a community called St. Bernard Parish. Now, I need to pause here to do a little bit of grammar translation. In New Orleans and in Louisiana, rather than counties, we have parishes. And rather than you guys, we say y'all. My stepdaughter, when she moved to New Orleans, had the toughest time when she would go to school and say, well, you guys, and they say, who are you talking to? Because, they said y'all. Anyway, so St. Bernard Parish is really interesting. It is a community that is directly adjacent to the Lower Ninth Ward. And I think all of you are familiar with the Lower Ninth Ward because it became the most famous New Orleans neighborhood overnight. And not because of anything good, but because of the failures around Hurricane Katrina. You saw the images of African-American families on their rooftops. You saw the images of the streets flooded. And you saw bodies floating in the water in the Lower Ninth Ward. You saw homes completely picked up off of their foundation and strewn around as though they were toys. So, but again, St. Bernard Parish is immediately adjacent to the Lower Ninth Ward. And what's interesting is that the media never made it over to St. Bernard Parish. Because number one, it was a little bit farther away, but number two, because the parish sheriff was afraid that African Americans in the Lower Ninth Ward would come in and loot St. Bernard Parish. So he got abandoned cars and piled them up along the border so that you couldn't get into the parish. It kept the media out, but it also meant that he had locked the residents of St. Bernard Parish in the parish. They couldn't get out. The flood damage and the storm damage was just as bad, if not worse, than what you saw in the Lower Ninth Ward. But they got very little media attention, and frankly, initially, got very little help because people couldn't get there because of this crazy idea by the sheriff. Now, St. Bernard Parish is a majority white community. 93% of the single-family homes in St. Bernard Parish are owned by white families. And the reason why that's important is because shortly after Hurricane Katrina, they did something really interesting. They passed an ordinance called the Blood Relative Ordinance. And the Blood Relative Ordinance, I'll save you from reading this gobbledygook, says that you can't rent your single-family home to anyone who you are not related to by blood. So, yeah, you can rent it to your cousin, to your mom, which, my mom beat me if I tried to rent it. But anyone who you're related to, you can rent your single-family home to, but you can't rent to someone who you're not related to. So at the point that you put this kind of restriction on housing, there's a real question about what your goal is. And I right away thought, well, maybe there's a constitutional issue here. Maybe the goal here, I don't know what the goal is, but maybe the problem here is that the government is essentially taking your property. So there's a takings claim under the Constitution. And so, we began complaining about it. We began doing our best fair share Jersey Housing Center imitation, and started, making a big fuss about this policy. And what happens eventually is that it becomes kind of clear to us that this probably is not this constitutional issue or something else, but that actually they're trying to keep people of color out of the parish. And this parish has a very long track record of engaging in heinous discrimination. And so we send out a press release, and a really interesting thing happens. There's a member of the parish council who has used racial epithets in public before, even at parish council meetings. And he calls me. And I missed his call, I listened to his message, and I said, I'm not sure if I even want to talk to this guy. And so I go to our staff attorneys and our counsel and ask, what should I do here? Should I talk to him? How is this going to affect us if we have to litigate sometime in the future? So they said, well, let us think about it, we'll get back to you. And then he calls from a different phone number, and again, I don't know why I gave my number out to so many people, but I ended up answering his call by mistake. And so he says, James Perry, I got to talk to you here because I know you're concerned, and I'm paraphrasing here, I know you're concerned about this ordinance, and I got to tell you, I'm concerned about it too. I was in on these meetings, I'm a member of the parish council, and they are just doing this to keep blacks and Latinos out of the parish. So I paused for a second, I said, wait, who is this again? And so it was a clear message to me at the point that one of the people who you consider to be one of the most racist people that there is says that this is too racist for them. then you got a problem on your hands. So it was clear, and it didn't take that phone call, though, for us to know that we needed to proceed. And we did, of course, pursue litigation against the parish. In the course of pursuing litigation, one of the very interesting things that happened is that the councilman who proposed the ordinance spoke to the media, and he said, in his defense, we're not changing the demographics. All we're doing is saying we want to maintain the demographics. I said, well, I think that you are arguing on our side. Would you like to be our attorney? Needless to say, that suit didn't go well for them. We were successful. We got the ordinance overturned fairly quickly. But that wasn't the end for St. Bernard Parish. After they did the blood relative ordinance, they set up all these roadblocks that would make it almost impossible to do any affordable rental housing. In particular, they put up a ban so that you could not build or renovate any multifamily housing. Of course, we litigated with them over that issue. There was a developer who had applied for low-income housing tax credits, who was ready to build, and so they put all these roadblocks in his way. He was building an apartment complex that was going to be right next to the brand new hospital, so it was going to be right next to jobs. You know, they didn't have a hospital. Where did they think all the doctors and nurses were going to live? Remember, everything except for 7 houses had been destroyed, but they were so bent on maintaining the demographic that they still went out of their way to make sure that this apartment complex wasn't built. So we sued them, of course. They were held in contempt of court 6 times, and we are now in the 8th year of litigation with St. Bernard Parish. So there was the blood relative ordinance initially. There were multiple ordinances that would have made it impossible to build multifamily housing or renovate multifamily housing. Then later on, they refused to give the developer the permit to build the housing. The judge had to hold them in contempt, threatened to fine them $50,000 a day to get them to finally issue the permit. The developer hurried up and built the property in record speed. I've never seen anyone build anything this quickly, and got it done just in time for the place and service date. And then the parish went and after realizing that the blood relative ordinance didn't work, did an ordinance called the permissive use permit process, whereby they don't explicitly say that they won't rent to you or allow you to get a permit to rent your property because of your race, but they apply it in a way so that people of color are unable to rent properties. And so that's what we're up against and what we're litigating over